Today, we are diving into a mind-blowing hidden story in Chongqing, that Chinese city that has gone viral with its skyscrapers stacked on hilly slopes and monorails that go straight through buildings. Yes, that's Chongqing city. But let's set aside the downtown hustle for a moment. At the city's outer skirts lies a valley that appears utterly ordinary until you uncover its World War II secret. This place, it was once the top secret headquarters for a US-China joint operation that trained 50,000 Chinese intelligence agents, aka wartime spies. Let's unpack it. The hilly Chongqing is surrounded by higher mountains and hills, and among them, this Shan mountain is the closest to city area. Due to this proximity, it provides the shelter and sanctuary during the wars for Chongqing. But here is the twist. In the tourist introduction here, there's only one line mentioning that this building was used by American Army officers as a residence. No other information was provided, so I did some research into it. Obviously, not many people know about what exactly happened here and what was the US-China wartime cooperation headquartered in this valley. The initiative or project between two governments in the 1940s was called Sino-American Cooperation Organization, abbreviated as SACO, SACO. It was established to train Chinese intelligence officers to collect information for American Army to fight Japan. Why has this significant chapter in history faded from the memories of both nations? Stick around, I will provide my personal explanation at the end. I divide this video into three parts. First, I will introduce the nature of the China-America cooperation. Secondly, I will explain the reasons behind this cooperation and its contributions to the war effort. Thirdly, I will discuss why this cooperation project has not received the commemoration it deserves in both the US and China. Let us start with part 1, the overall introduction to the Sino-American Cooperation Organization, or SACO, its history and its current status. This villa, originally built by a warlord or military general in Sichuan province as a villa in the mountains, but it witnessed a special cooperation between the United States and China during the Second World War. This building is the famous Bai Gongguan, which literally means Villa of Mr. Bai. It served as a residence for some American Navy officers, among other facilities along the valley. Many of the training facilities built for this US-China joint training program were not developed into tourist sites, except for one larger former prison located about 1.5 kilometers down the valley. This other tourist site is called Zhazidong or Zhazidong Cave Prison. Two spots every Chinese person would recognize. Domestic tourists always add these two sites to their itinerary because they are huge in Communist Party history. However, for foreign travelers pressed for time, these sites might not make the cut. Another reason these sites are not known among foreign tourists is that they are mainly known as the site of a brutal massacre related to China's civil war after the Second World War, which means after the Americans retreated, and there was a massacre happening to these two prisons. And today, these two prisons or these two sites became memorial places. So, before we delve into the historical details of China-US cooperation, let's quickly go over why these sites are renowned in China today, yet not strongly associated with the US role. Here's the reason. The Chinese agency working with the Americans was the notorious BIS, Bureau of Investigation and Statistics. What was their main job? It is an intelligence service agency that largely played a role in China to suppress dissidents, most of whom were communists. Before the US participated in this area for the joint training program, the villa and the cave here were already prisons. Once the Sino-American or US-China cooperation kicked off, they built new buildings everywhere, turning the valley into a restricted military zones. And the cave and the villa became part of the training program. And this was the time this villa became a residence for American military staff. But after the Americans left, the prisons were once again filled with political prisons, communists, left-leaning thinkers, and countless others. And then things got horrific. As the then China's nationalist government fled to Taiwan, security guards massacred over 180 prisoners just 3 days before the communist troops took over Chongqing, or liberated Chongqing as it is called. A famous child martyr died as well. Only 15 people survived the massacre. That tragic event is the reason these places have become memorials. 80 years later, most Chinese tourists would visit these two sites in droves, especially older folks who grew up on these stories when they were kids. Tours might briefly mention Americans were here, but the detailed roles of a Sino-American Cooperation Organization totally glossed over. So let's rectify that. Coming up next is the part 2 of this video, explaining why there was this SACO, how did it go, and what made them important. Flashback to 1943. After 1 year's planning and preparation, China and the US government signed the agreement to officiate the Sino-American Cooperation Organization, or SACO. The goal? During World War II, the Chinese government at that time and the US collaborated on military intelligence across China, sharing information on Japanese troop movements, weather data, training of guerrillas, and preparing for potential coastal landings by the US Navy. And can you guess where SACO established its headquarters? This valley outside Chongqing City, the temporary wartime capital of China. The US shipped in weapons and jointly organized training camps across China and trained 50,000 Chinese personnel. This building, standing at the highest point of construction in the valley, was designated for General Dai Li, the Chinese leader of SACO. Less than a mile away, a residence was constructed for the American chief, Admiral Milton Myers, although he never actually moved in. It is said that Admiral Myers had a fondness for plum blossoms, leading to the planting of numerous plum trees around the residence, which was aptly named the Villa of Plum Blossom in Chinese. Across China, SACO teams from two countries spied, trained, and fought Japan side by side. Over a span of 3 years, 3,000 Americans imparted knowledge on a wide range of skills to 50,000 Chinese special agents, including meteorology, code breaking, surveillance skills, firearms schemes, firearms handling, disguise techniques, and even assassination methods. One notable achievement was that they set up 165 weather stations across China. Their data were critical for US Pacific Fleet submarine attacks on Japanese ships. The US Navy later admitted it was the only source for that type of intelligence. Important fact, most of the Americans in SACO were Navy personnel. It was during the Pacific War that the US designated the Navy to collaborate with China. Although few of the activities involved the sea and instead took place in rural areas of China, this Navy personnel jokingly referred themselves as the Navy in the rice paddies. After the war, they had a Veterans Association of 4,000 strong and primarily by Americans, and had annual reunions since 1954. Unfortunately, most of these guys have passed away. I hope many of them would have had a chance to visit places they served in China since China opened for American tourists in early 1980s. Check the website for more information. Let's get into some unverified legends. Why did the US and China team up? Blame Pearl Harbor. Before that, America was selling weapons to both China and Japan and made fortunes. But Chinese intelligence intercepted Japan's Pearl Harbor plans and passed this information to the US. But America ignored it, thinking China couldn't have good information. After the Pearl Harbor attack, suddenly Americans realized that China was half occupied and culturally, linguistically close to Japan, and China became an ideal place to help American navies to gather intelligence on Japan. So naturally, SACO was born. Now comes part 3, also the last part of this video. Why this Sino-American Cooperation Organization, or SACO, wasn't celebrated like other joint projects between China and the US. The US has helped China in this war against Japan, such as the Flying Tigers Air Force, as well as the Myanmar Road, bringing supplies of wartime from Myanmar into China. But for now, I just keep this version short and simple. After the cooperation concluded, sections of these headquarters reverted to being prisons for communists, and subsequently the massacre occurred in this villa and cave prison. By the time all the SACO soldiers returned to US in 1946, China was already in civil war. Since there were overlapping time, many people believe that the Americans had been training the nationalist government agents to suppress communists as well as the opposition powers. As for the US side, why isn't SACO remembered as a model of cooperation? After the Cold War began immediately after the Second World War, New China became America's enemy. Also, the American Navy didn't get the credit for defeating Japan. The Air Force and the strategic bombing did. OSS officers, those American special spies at that time, they were embedded with the SACO teams. They were seen as more effective intelligence gathering, even though they relied on the SACO network. Later, this OSS formed the CIA. The Navy men, aka the Rice Paddy Navy, who trained 50,000 Chinese and shelled their hardships, did the gritty work, but had no clear glory. After the war, a US proposal that might continue the Navy cooperation to help China build a modern Navy was scrapped due to bureaucracy and politics. And especially China soon sank into civil war. The China side of SACO became the primary institution focusing on surveillance and suppressing dissidents, staining its reputation. And this also caused the collateral damage to the SACO partnership. This video is coming to an end. History is messy, right? And it echoes today. As US politicians label China an enemy today, it seems that many of them have depicted China as a perpetual enemy without knowing that exchanges between the two nations dates back to 100 years ago. To get a better understanding of international relations, maybe people all should visit this valley. See how history was overshadowed by different reasons and motives and narrations from different countries. And hopefully we may all learn some lessons from the past.